Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Anxious Lad podcast. My name is Matt Keenan, and as always, you're all very, very welcome. Joining me today in the virtual Anxious Lad studios is Sean McNicholas. Sean, how are you doing?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good. So we're going to flip the format slightly on this episode, folks. Up until now, all of the podcasts I've done have kind of been interviews with guys telling their story of mental health, their battles with anxiety, with depression, relationships, all that kind of stuff. But the reason I got Sean on the show today was actually to start looking at what is mental health, what's anxiety, what it's not. We'll talk about therapy. We'll talk about Sean's business, New Me Therapy, and what that entails. So, yeah, Sean, you're very, very welcome.
Thank you very much.
So tell me, right? So let's jump straight into it then, right? So your business, New Me Therapy. Tell us what New Me Therapy is.
So New Me Therapy is a solution-based type of therapy which enables me to work in a way which is much more fast and effective than the conventional ways of counselling or typical therapies. What I mean by that is rather than go to see a counsellor or therapist every week for 50 minutes to an hour to talk about what they think may be wrong with them. The issue with that, I find, is that, and from my experience when clients come to me afterwards, is that in that hour you don't really get to the crux of what's going on, because you only talk about things on a surface level. And when you talk on a surface level, it means that you can't really go to the deep root cause of where that issue is coming from, because everyone comes with an issue of some sort. Whether it's any type of anxiety, if there's a form of addiction, if it's OCD, and you cannot work and find that solution in an hour. And sometimes it's another week till the client goes back to tap into that again. Sometimes after 45 minutes, you tap on something that's really interesting, and both the counsellor and the client are really interested to proceed further, but time's up. Mm-hmm. The clock has stopped. Park that up, park those thoughts and feelings, which is very difficult, and then I'll see you this time next week. Now, for me, it's like I always say, if you have really excruciating toothache, you don't want to go and see the dentist every week and sit on that chair and talk about the pain. You want that dentist to dive in, really explore what's going on and understand where that root cause is coming from and remove that pain. Take those roots out so you can start living in a pain-free life. And this is what New Me Therapy does. I work with a number of different techniques: CBT, RTT, NLP, hypnotherapy, IFS. These mean nothing to so many people, but the main thing is I get results. People say, I've got anxiety, for example, can you help me? And I say, okay, go to the website, look at my Trustpilot reviews, and like when we had the conversation. And what I do is, over a couple of days, we really dive into what's going on, because a lot of people think there's something wrong with them. It's not about what's wrong with you. It's what happened to you for you to start thinking and feeling this way. And that's what I do. So the first session's all about, you and I are talking now, as you know, and we have a long conversation about, tell me what the problem is, when did it start? We try to go back to a time and a place where this is all started from. Then we talk about your childhood. We talk about the history. I try to start working on the connections, find the dots, because everything is associated to the past. Everything is associated to past memories. Everything is associated to core beliefs. So this is what I start to work on in that first session. Then I also try to reset you into the present. So I say, Matt, tell me what it is that you want now. Tell me what it is. What does it look like? How does it feel? And then we start working on your future. So in that first session, we go from dealing with the past on a conscious level, and then we go right through to start focusing on your future. And this is where people start feeling better about themselves. They start to feel that hope. And then what I do is I gather all that information, and normally the next day or the day afterwards, we go into the deep work. We go into hypnotherapy. So what it means now is I switch off the conscious mind and I talk to the subconscious. And the subconscious mind is 95% of the mind. That's where the hard drive is. That's what your memories are. That's where your core beliefs are. You know, so what I do is I switch off the conscious mind, I dive into the subconscious, and I take you back to a time and place to really understand what happened, how you perceived it at that time, what it meant to you, what were those core beliefs. And it'll normally be something to do with, I felt unloved, I felt like I wasn't good enough. I felt different. I didn't feel connected. I felt insignificant. I felt like I never mattered. So we really dive in to understand what happened.
Yeah.
And then with that, we start moving forward and start getting you to look at this now from an adult's perspective rather than a young child. And that's the work I do. So by the time you go through that transformation, the session takes 2 to 3 hours. But by the time you come out through that journey, and it is a roller coaster, as you know, but by the time you come out, the client is looking 10 years younger, because all of a sudden you just released so many of those old thoughts, patterns and beliefs. You released all of that baggage. You no longer carry that dead weight in your life. And that's what New Me Therapy is all about. It's all about fast, instant results. And this is what people are looking for. They don't want to carry that burden anymore. They don't want to feel that shame, guilt or blame anymore. They just want to live their life and start working on their freedom, start working on their future.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think there's a few things I think we need to unpack then from that. So you brought up a lot of stuff that we're going to, I guess, talk about now. I think the first thing is to say I completely get where you're coming from in describing that. So how Sean and I actually met was I was actually a client of Sean's, and I've gone through his methods, and they are fantastic. I think the reason I look 10 years younger now is because I shaved since the last time we did the session, so the grey beard is gone. But I do feel
You're a new man, that's why.
Yeah, absolutely. But that is the thing, though. I think, look, I've been through the conventional end of it, right? And as you know, we spoke about it, and I've spoken about it openly on the podcast after my breakdown, and being put on medication and stuff. And then I started seeing a psychotherapist, and I was going to see her for, it was once a week for the guts of 5 or 6 months, and it is a roller coaster, and you do on the one level, on the one page, I guess, you talk about stuff on a surface level in a session, and you're getting into a conversation and you really feel like you're doing it, and next of all, boom, the alarm was going off on her phone to say 5 minutes left, 10 minutes left, that kind of thing, and then I get up and you walk out of that session, not to knock psychotherapists in any way, shape or form, by the way, because it did help me a great deal when I went through it. I'd come home and I'd have to get into bed for an hour or two because I was just exhausted after it. And I'm trying to, I guess, like you say, you get to a point where you're just about to get somewhere, and all of a sudden the alarm goes off, and then you have to get up and walk out and go home and try and process what you've just been talking about, and then think about, well, how do I bring that up in the next session? How do I talk about that? So it is a longer process. It is absolutely effective, and it did wonders for me and for my communication, and how I communicate with my wife, my kids, people around me, all that kind of stuff. But I think the biggest difference then with working with you was there's more of a, I don't want to say if clarity is the right word to use. There's more of an understanding as to where it all came from, I think, after doing it with you. And that was a bit like you reached out after a post I put up on Facebook. You reached out to me and offered your services, and we went through it, and I've done the 2.5 hour, 3 hour session with you, which was incredible. And I'll let you explain the methods during that and what happens afterwards as well. But since then, I guess, yeah, it does work. I am less anxious now. I do feel I can just go out and do stuff. Do you know what I mean? I've more of a passion about what I'm doing now. I've a bigger drive to succeed in what I'm doing now, certainly with the podcast and stuff. So it is incredible. So let's break it down, all right? Let's look at the I guess the aspects of New Me Therapy, right? So there's CBT, FTT, and NLP. So let's break those down on what they actually are. Or did I mispronounce them there?
There's actually more. There's what is hypnotherapy, there's compassionate inquiry, there's IFS, which is internal family systems. So if I go through the process, and I can tell you when I start to use the different modalities.
Mm-hmm.
So you first of all, when we do the first part, which is the hypnotherapy, it's about you going into a deep, calm, and relaxed state, and that's all about just switching off the conscious mind. Now, A lot of people think hypnosis is all about being on a stage and someone clicking their fingers and you run around like a chicken. That's called stage hypnosis. Stage hypnosis is not hypnotherapy. Hypnotherapy is about switching off that conscious mind so we can start working in a therapeutic manner. Once I know you're in a deep, calm, and relaxed state, and by the way, even though your eyes are closed, you know yourself, you are really hyper-focused.
Yeah.
It's not about being asleep. You are totally aware of where you are, your surroundings. You can hear everything I'm saying. You can feel it. The sensations are much more vivid and profound. So we first go back to a time and a place. So in your case, it was anxiety, because like I said, no one is born with anxiety. Anxiety comes into your life at some stage when you weren't able to cope. And that's normally to do with some time in your past where there was a lack of control, feeling powerless or helpless. It's all about feeling under threat, but you couldn't do nothing about it, and especially if you're a young child, because normally when you feel stressed, you activate your nervous system. When you activate your nervous system, you go into fight, flight, or freeze. Now, most of the time, for example, if you're a young child and there's something going on in the home, you're never going to, for example, if it's your dad shouting at you, you're never going to fight your dad. You can't run away because you're a small, helpless child. So it's safer in that moment just to freeze or cower or fawn, they call it, which means that you kind of submit. And by submitting, because really you want to fight him or run away, you can't, you feel trapped in that moment. That's the first part of your brain adapting, changing who you are, changing your blueprint, because all of a sudden you're changing your authenticity. Okay, so we go back to a time and a place, and when I do this method with you, Matt, you go, when I say to you we're going to count back 5 to 1, and I use some terminology, you can, it's like a flashback in your mind. You can feel yourself going back in time, and all of a sudden, all those years go back, and all of a sudden you specifically pinpoint the moment when the first time you felt that anxiety.
Yeah, and I think that was the really interesting part. And like you said, right, when you go into that hypnosis state, right, you are hyper alert. You're not asleep. You're not kind of doing what you're told. You know, your conscious brain is still working on a certain level, but subconscious brain is obviously there as well. And you're kind of saying, right, we're going to do this, and I want you to think about a time, and then you say it again, and you say it again. So my eyes are closed. I'm sitting there, and it's like a video reel of all of these different times in my past life are flashing forward, and you go, okay, now tell me about a time, and boom, a time I hadn't thought about in 30 years popped into my head. Yeah. And it was like, wow, okay, where did that come from? Do you know what I mean? And we kind of did that 2 or 3 times during the session then as well. So there was a time when I was a kid, there was a time when I was in school, and there was a time when I was an adult as well. And each of those different memories, I guess, were stuff that I hadn't thought about in a very, very long time. But I think that kind of brings it back then to what the NLP is then, the neurolinguistics element of it then. So that moment of fear or shock or horror or anxiety or panic or whatever it was, as you say, changes your blueprint. So then years later, like for me, if I'm having an argument with my wife, like we used to, or I'm in a situation or whatever, that feeling that you had 30 odd, 40 odd years ago comes back, and then boom, you're back into that moment then in time, isn't it?
Because you're activating an old memory. So what happened in your current day? Something will happen to you today. Sometimes it's just a perceived threat, and you've activated an old memory, and it takes you back to a time and a place where you felt powerless, you felt helpless, you felt trapped, you felt alone. Whatever feeling it was, whatever that core belief was, I don't think I'm good enough. People don't care about me. And it takes you back to that time and place, and every emotion or memory from that day through to today just pushes through. I call it the box of pain. All of a sudden, this box of pain comes through. So when you have an argument with your wife today, all of a sudden, when you're really angry and you're in a really emotional state, a negative state, you will instantly bring up all those memories of the past, everything she's ever done to you in the past. But when you're in a really loving, romantic state, you bring up all the fantastic, happy memories that you have with her. Mm-hmm. And so even when you're in that hypnotic state, and just to remember, most of the work I do is online, and it's really important to say that when you're in hypnosis, you're totally safe and secure. You're normally comfortable in your own home. We will only talk about things that you're happy to talk about, and you can come out of hypnosis whenever you like. You have full autonomy in that moment. So what happens is when we go into that scene, Matt, you are literally, if you say to me you're 6 years old, you're in the kitchen and your mum and dad are arguing, you are literally that 6-year-old child. You're seeing through a 6-year-old's eyes. You can hear everything. And when you talk about you can't remember those memories, the reason why is because a lot of these memories are so far pushed down and repressed that you cannot recall them. The only way to get them is to go through a state of hypnosis or to do some type of therapy that uses the unconscious systems, because consciously you could never remember that. And consciously, if I said to you, what was the colour of the wallpaper in the kitchen? What was your mum cooking? What could you smell? You wouldn't be able to do it consciously, but you can through this method. So then you tell me what's going on as that small, young, innocent child. But the questions I'm asking you is really to understand, how are you feeling? What does that mean to you? What is it that's making you so scared? By being scared, what does that mean to you? And we really drill down to the root cause, because the root cause is, I don't feel safe. I don't feel I'm lovable. I don't feel they care about me. I feel insignificant. And those core beliefs are formed from such a young age, before most of the time your conscious brain has even started to develop. So therefore these core beliefs are instilled in you like they're truths. So for example, when you're told at 4 years old about Santa Claus, you believe it to be true because you never challenge it, because everything that came from your parents, you trusted it. So you believed it to be true until someone changed your perception of it. And that's what the work is I do. We get that core belief which you formed for many years ago, and we get to review it now and look at it from a different perspective. Now as a grown man, as an adult man, and now to realise you felt sometimes children blame themselves. They're very egocentric when they're younger. So what that means is that every time something happens and your dad's being unkind to you, you blame yourself. I must be unlovable. He hates me. What's wrong with me? But now as an adult, we look back and we think, okay, Dad was really busy. He had 2 jobs. He was under pressure. He was stressed. He just didn't have enough time for everyone in the house. So now we change the meaning of it. We change the perception of it. And by doing that, you let it go. You no longer carry that blame, that guilt, or that shame.
Yeah, and I think that's probably one of the most important things you probably could have said there as well. It's trying to get that perception of it then, isn't it, as an adult, and changing your view and your perception of stuff. Like there's an interview we'll be doing in another week or two with a girl who's a life coach, and she talks about that, and it's how her dad's mental state at the time has shaped her life and her view of relationships as well, and for many years, and it's only as she became an adult and then started to break it down and she got into counselling and into coaching work and stuff like that, it's only now she realises the different spin on it. Basically, her dad suffered with depression, with anxiety, and now she understands it a lot more, whereas for years, being an only child as she was, she thought it was her. I'm the problem. I'm the root of this. What can I do to make sure that doesn't happen kind of going forward? And so I get, like, if we look at it at that sense then, right, what can we do, I guess, and one of the main thing for the podcast and doing this work is I guess to make men aware that you don't have to be you don't have to suffer with depression. You don't have to have any major mental health disorder or anything like that, but a lot of us would have certain aspects of anxiety in us. What can we do then, I guess, as men, as dads, as husbands, as boyfriends, whatever, to kind of make sure that we're not doing that on a daily basis, to give our kids that perception of us and almost repeating the cycle nearly?
Yeah, I mean, it's really important to know that it's not what happens that affects us, it's the meaning that we attach to it at that time that affects us. So once we change the meaning to what happened, then everything else changes completely. You untie all those other knots that have been keeping you stuck and holding you back for so long. And it's just about really being mindful, and just really being mindful to, especially with lots of children. Now, anxiety is brought on by stress, and there's 4 things that bring on stress. It's lack of information, loss of control, uncertainty, or any type of conflict. And when we have these unmet needs, this is when stress comes in and it activates the anxiety as well. So it's all a case of, sometimes when a child is being told off, but they're not being told off, they're not being explained as to why they're being told off. So there's this confusion, lack of information. So that lack of information is like, I'm being told off, but I'm not being told why. You know, and by doing so, they come to their own conclusions. So it's really important that parents spend a lot more time with their children explaining things, because by explaining things, they get clarity. You mentioned clarity before, but once you have clarity, then you have more knowledge, and knowledge is power when you take action. You know, now they can move forward and say, okay, now I understand why my dad was cross with me. Now I understand what I can do to improve that, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
So communication is so key for so many reasons.
And I think and just as you said, actually, I'm even thinking about how I kind of do with my kids and when they were younger and stuff. And I think we do it on a subconscious level. You know, you're telling your kid not to do that. Why? Because I said so. Like, that doesn't really explain why you're giving it. But we do it. Like, I know I've done that all the time with my kid. You know, don't be doing it. Why not? Because I said so. That's why. Don't need to explain myself. But actually, you do need to explain yourself. You do need to break it down and make them understand why you're telling them not to do something or
Yeah. Well, look, children are very sensitive creatures. So even if you are in the room together, they know if you're not paying them full attention. They know that you're not being present. So if you're having a conversation with if your child's speaking to you and you're looking at your phone or you're looking at TV, they know you're not giving them the full attention. Inside, they're thinking, okay, why am I not getting that attention? Does he love me? Am I unlovable? Am I worth it? You know, do I deserve his love? You know, what's going on? And all these subconscious things, especially for men, because in terms of men versus women, men are internal thinkers. And what I mean by that is that when something's going on, they go internally. Where women, if they have a problem, they think externally. And what I mean by that is that when something's on their mind, they'll go see one of their friends, have a coffee, go for a glass of wine, and tell the world what's going on. And they try to problem solve by themselves and with their friend. Whereas men, they try to internalise it. They try to fix the problems themselves. So when the wife goes home and there's an issue with the mortgage, and she's shouting, he's on the sofa and he's looking at the TV, he's not actually absorbing what's on the TV. He's actually really thinking internally, but we're very quiet. And the more quiet we are, the more we're thinking, the more we're under pressure.
I think that's a really good point to make. Certainly from a male perspective, in how we deal, in how we communicate through not communicating, I guess, to put it that way.
Yeah.
And we did. And I think the funny thing is that even as men, and I spoke about this to a lad the other day, is that we always try to fix everything, right? We are fixers, you say. We're internal thinkers. We try to break it down, analyse it in our heads, try and understand what's happening. How can we fix this, right? Like it used to annoy the hell out of my wife. I had to kind of flip how I communicated years ago as well. Like, she was having a bad day in work, for argument's sake, and come home and it's like, oh, it's a shit day, this, that, blah, blah, blah. And I'll be like, well, can you not do this or can you not do that? And it's like, Matt, I don't need you, just shut up and listen. I don't need you to fix it. I just want to talk. I need to vent. And as you say, they're external thinkers, so she's just venting. But in my mind, I was like, okay, well, how do I make this better? How do I fix it? You don't need to fix it, you just need to support it.
Well,
do you know what I mean?
You just need to listen, because
yeah, exactly, yeah.
What she's basically doing, by her telling you this, she's actually trying to resolve the problem herself.
Yeah,
Maybe sharing, but she's not looking for you to ask her questions because she's in her own cycle inside her own head.
Yeah, and that's the thing. And I think, as you say, like, we're internal, so we're taking it all in, but we're trying to fix it in our own heads. But then when it comes, I think, to our mental health, right, as men, and we don't understand why we're depressed, or we don't understand why we're anxious or angry all the time, or, you know, you don't understand why all of a sudden you feel the need to have 2 or 3 beers every night of the week just to try and bring you down or whatever. We don't take our own advice. We don't think internally about that and try and look for the ways to fix it. We just kind of think, I'm fine, I can control this, I've got it. I think that's one of the...
That's called ego. So with men, it's all about ego. I can take care of himself, of this. I'm a proud man. I know I can fix this. And the more they internalise, because they're too embarrassed to share it with their friends, because they may be ridiculed, they may feel inferior, you know, there are many reasons why it doesn't happen, but the more deeper and deeper they go, they get stuck in a rut until the point they get to the point of no return, where they feel like, I can't fix this, I must be useless. And I'm also a Samaritan, so I work with Samaritans, and I handle many calls every week to do with issues around suicidal thoughts and men not being able to cope. And rather than going to their friends or their partner, they will call us confidentially, because they can't turn anywhere else, because they fear the shame, they feel the embarrassment. You know, I'll give you an example. When women are stressed and things on their minds, they'll call their friend up and say, can we go for a glass of wine? I just want to talk to you. And they'll tell them their problems, and they'll share it, and they'll have a conversation. Now, Matt's having a stressful day at work. He's not getting on with his wife. He asks his mates to meet him in the pub. Football's on. You go see your friends and say, guys, I need to talk to you about my wife. I've got loads of problems at home. And they'll look at you in a really strange way and say, I've left my home to go to the pub to get away from my own wife and kids. The football's on. I don't want to talk to you about this. I'm trying to escape myself.
Mm-hmm.
Have you experienced that?
To a degree. I think, yeah, I mean, I can relate to it for sure as a man in today's society, as a 40-year-old in today's society. I think definitely, yeah, there are times when you just need to vent, but you can't. Do you know what I mean? And it's interesting you bring this up, actually, because I did want to talk to you about this, in that, is that a societal thing? Is it a man thing? Like, where do we learn, or where do we, or should I say, like, we don't learn to talk? Where do we learn that?
It's conditioning, right?
Yeah, but okay, so is it conditioning? That's the word I was looking for. But is it a social conditioning? Is it a home life conditioning? Is it a, you know, do our parents unknowingly condition us in this way? Is it a generational thing? Like I think there are so many different layers to that. You know, okay. It might be difficult to break it all down, but
as far back as you can remember, when was the first time you were told, stop crying, big boys don't cry, never show weakness? Where did that start?
Probably as a child, to be honest. I think we've all... Teachers, parents, I think it kind of comes on both sides, doesn't it? I mean, it's funny, actually. I remember when I lived in London, and I was coaching my son's football team. Now, they're only 6, 7 years of age at the time, and one of the little, you know, they go into a tackle, one of them hits the deck, the ground is hard, the studs kicked them, he twisted, whatever the case is, right? So the coach runs on with the magic water and the sponge to try and make it better, and there's tears rolling down his face. And even me, I did it, I'm guilty of doing it as well. I'd splash water in his face and then do that. And I'm not saying don't cry, I'm not saying don't show, but I'm literally trying to make him feel like it's okay, people don't need to see that you're crying, you're fine. But actually, he does need to cry because he's upset. He's hurt. This is how he's dealing with the physical pain. It's hurting him.
Yeah.
You know?
Sometimes it's not what we say, Matt. It's what we do.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
The child will pick up on that.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that
that's it, like
tears, rather than saying, you know what, you're really emotional at the moment, just express yourself. You know, because that's the way crying is part of the way to calm down and regulate themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And you're shutting that down. So what's happening is those boys are conditioning themselves not to be emotional, and all those emotions that are being pushed down time and time again until they become men. And again, they've been conditioned not to show expression, not to share their feelings. You know, those feelings got to go somewhere. If you can't express them vocally, they're pushed down, and they show up in different ways. So when you're stressed and you're under pressure, they show up through your emotions. You could be angry, frustrated. Some people are depressed. Mm-hmm. And then it shows up in physical response as well. You could have thyroid issues, you could have eczema, you could have IBS, you know, there could be Hashimoto's, fibromyalgia. You know, there could be so many different things that can happen as a result of not being able to express yourself and then allow those emotions out.
Yeah, and people use that expression, it's eating me up inside, and it literally is, like, isn't it? It as you say, there are physical repercussions to what you're mentally feeling.
Yeah, well, look at cancer. You know, a lot of that's stress related. You know, to listen to your body is trying to tell you something. When these things are presenting themselves in different ways, that's your body saying to you, I can't cope anymore. this is too much. We need to take a rest. We need to just check in with ourselves. And I always say to people, when you have a car, you get it serviced every year. When you get a phone, you upgrade it every 2 or 3 years. How often do you update your mind? How often do you get that serviced? You've got one brain to last you your whole lifetime. And how much attention do we give it? Because there's so much wear and tear, there's so much neglect, there's so much conditioning moving you away from your authentic self. So who is the person in front of me now that I look in the mirror? Am I the person that I should be, who I want to be?
Yeah, and that's a really good point as well, actually. I think, if we break that down and look at it, how do you service the brain? How do you service the mind? So does that involve mindfulness? Is it meditation? Is it just picking up the phone and ringing somebody? Is it maybe I'm a moderator on a couple of dad groups on Facebook, and you can see guys that they don't know anybody on it. So as you say, calling the Samaritans, it's probably easier to talk to somebody who you don't know, because there's no judgment there. There's nothing, you can just vent without fear of getting anything back. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's all of the above. It's just about relaxing the mind, giving it some rest, giving it some release. Mindfulness, meditation, yoga, walking. Even if it's walking around a block, it's nice to walk in nature. It's nice to feel free. It's nice just to remove yourself from stressful environments. Anything that just calms you down, that relaxes you. Reading, listening to podcasts, less stressful podcasts than yours, by the way. Trigger. But the point is about, I have clients that come to see me on a quarterly basis just to talk, because sometimes we did an exercise before about, I said to you, just tell me something recently that upset you, and just by having that conversation, we did this stepped approach, which went down to finding out there were some core beliefs about yourself that you didn't really pay attention to. And sometimes we say, right, let's look at this, because we just need to reset it. And that's what my practice does. New Me Therapy is about the reset. Sometimes we've just moved in a different direction away from who we are. We've just gone off course a bit. So what I do is I realign you back to where you should be in your life.
Yeah, and that's it. It's when we finished the mains. I think we had two calls prior to the main session, as you call it, or the hypnotherapy one. And that's, as you say, it's a good couple of hours long. And what like I said, what was really interesting about that for me was that after I'd been in a counselling session, and I'd done bereavement counselling as a child, I did bereavement counselling as an adult, I did stress and anger management kind of stuff, and then it was only a couple of years ago that I kind of said, right, I really need to give this a go now, and I did the main kind of psychotherapy stuff. But like I said earlier, I'd walk out of that and have to go to sleep for an hour because I was just mentally exhausted from it. What I found with your one was that although we unpacked a lot of stuff in those 2 hours, you kind of come away from it feeling completely refreshed and upbeat, and just a new view, I think, and a new way of back to the whole core of your thing. It's giving you a different perception of everything, really, isn't it?
Yeah, and that's why I say solution based, because I want to make sure that once we start that journey, we get to the very end of it, and I let you go off into the sunset, a happy man, and it's like there's no point me putting you into those scenes and are very traumatic and saying, right, okay, bell's gone, time's up. That's very transactional. For me, it's about we work together. I always say to all my clients that this is a partnership. I'm going to give you 100% of my commitment and time to make this as effective as possible, so we get the results that you want. And that's how it works. So we make sure that some sessions, it could be 2 hours. It depends what presents. It depends what the person's coming to before. It could be weight loss. It could be smoking. It could be anything. But the point is, some of these sessions, depending what surfaces, depending if there's an issue to do with an abuser, there's something going on, particularly with your dad. There's certain techniques that I then integrate into the session. So depending on where you take me is where I then use those other techniques and modalities. Yeah. So, for example, and do you remember when I wanted to know where you felt that anxiety in your body. Can you remember that?
Yes.
And I was getting to really focus on the intensity and where it was in your body. And then once we identify where that part was, how it makes you feel, really feel that sensation. And then we worked on releasing that part from your body because, like I said, you weren't born with anxiety. It came into your life at some stage. So that anxiety is a part that came into your life that does not belong to you. So if you can create it, you can also let it go. And that's what we did. And that's with the balloon, when you did that.
Yeah. And that's it. Like, and it is so effective. I have to say, and as you say, look, I'd never thought of it in a physical space, I guess, or in a physical part of me. And then obviously you questioned it. Where is it? I could feel it here in the back of my head, but then also that comes down into the tension, into the back, into the neck, and I'm constantly kind of, sitting this way, or I'm upright like that, or whatever. Or when I feel anxious, or when something happens, I can feel myself tense. And I can feel it just here, just here. And it just gives you a completely different view of it, I guess, that and as I said, look, I've been through loads of different types of therapy sessions over the years. That solution-based method, I think, for me was incredible. Not to say that the other therapy never worked, because it did, right? I think after all of the work I did on myself over the last 18 months or so, I'm definitely calmer. I was doing some Qigong and breathing exercises with another guy who was on the show, who was going to be joining me again. And from a breathing perspective, getting to sleep at night was better. So there's loads of different tricks I was able to use, I guess, to kind of bring that anxiety down. But it was always kind of still, and I think it always will be there to a certain degree, right? I think now I've got a much clearer way of dealing with it, of recognising it. And not allowing it to manifest in the ways that it did in the past,
Yeah. And sleep is a real issue with people with anxiety, and that's why as well, when I go through the questions when we first have the first call, I always ask questions about your well-being, your diet, your exercise, caffeine in particular, alcohol, but sleep. Tell me about your sleep. And if they say to me, like, I'm getting up in the middle of the night, my mind's racing, stuff like that, what I do even before we start the sessions, I provide you with a sleep guide. So I give you like these hints, tips and tricks of how to start going back to living as a caveman and how cavemen used to live. It's all about, the hunter-gatherer goes out during sunlight. When that sun goes down, you go into that dark cave, which means that you switch off your lights in your living room or wherever you are, and you go into that cold, dark bedroom, and then you unwind. There could be some meditation, could be some reading, but you're slowly getting yourself into that sleep cycle. And just by doing that and making that a pattern every day, you're conditioning yourself to go into a much more deep, because it's about quality of sleep rather than quantity. People say I get 8 hours sleep, but they're drinking four pints of beer before they go to bed. So I said, yeah, it is a sleep, but it's a very bad sleep. You're waking up groggy, you're making poor choices in the morning. Whereas with this method of this stepped approach again as to how to induce a really deep sleep, I always want people to really get into that first before we even start the session. So after the sessions, they're sleeping much better.
Yeah. And that's it. I think, I said this early on in one of the other episodes as well, like I suffered from night terrors and nightmares for a long time. And now luckily that's stopped. I mean, it was, and even though to the point, like, even my wife has even said it, like, she goes, she'd never up until it started to kind of retract, she'd never known me to sleep as well as I do now. And like that, I would always sit. I think I was afraid to fall asleep because of the nightmares and stuff. So I'm trying to keep myself awake, and then I'm going, and the body's twitching, and that's, I guess, a physical reaction to my body telling me, brain, wake up. You don't want to go to sleep, get back, and then you're constantly doing this. So the sleep aids, the sleeping methods, that kind of stuff, the breathing, the Qigong, or the breathing methods through Qigong that I was doing, getting into bed at night, not watching my phone up till 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, leaving the phone downstairs at night, reading when I get into bed, as you say, the dim lights, all of that has a massive, and they sound like so simple, silly little things, but they have a massive impact on your quality of sleep.
Yeah, but it's also, people just slowly have gone into this sort of culture of just, people have TVs in their bedroom. People just, the last thing they do is they're on their phones. Phones have got blue light technology. It's like having a coffee shop before you go to bed, you know. And for me, it's all about especially when people have got many things, they're stressed out, they've got many things on their mind. So what they do is they keep themselves busy all day long. They keep themselves busy to avoid the voices and the noise in their head. But what that means is, by being busy all day long, the moment you lie in your bed and switch the light out, is the moment that backlog of thoughts and feelings and sensations comes and rushes over your mind. So the way my sleep guide works is that we allow ourselves some space and time before we go to bed to reflect and decompress some of those things that are going on. So by the time you go to sleep, all of those thoughts, worries, fears, concerns, you've kind of put them to bed. You've kind of put some perspective and put some spin on it, and give yourself a plan for tomorrow. So you can just fall asleep knowing that everything is fine.
Yeah, yeah. And would that include, like, would you say then to do that, would you say, okay, so maybe turn the TV off 10 minutes before, because I know I'm guilty of that as well, like we're watching TV on the sofa, we knock it off and get straight into bed. Do you know what I mean? Like, not that we wouldn't have a TV in the bedroom anyway, but that was obviously a pattern I would have for a long time, is I'd watch TV, get into bed, and then maybe turn my phone on and watch Netflix for 2 hours or something. As you say, to switch down, to decompress, to process everything that's happening in the day, would that be just turn the telly off, even sit on the sofa for 10 minutes before you actually go to your bed or your bedroom or whatever?
Remember, the bedroom is a room to sleep, nothing else. So there should be no watching TV, phone calls, anything like that. Just separate the rooms, and they all have their own function and role. And by doing so, then your body subconsciously knows that when it goes into that bedroom, into that dark cave, it's time to sleep. This is the room. It's a cooler room. The lights are down. You go into that deep, dark, cool cave. You're going to start going to sleep.
Yeah, yeah.
These are like triggers into the mind.
Yeah, and it does, and I have to say, like, over the last few months, you know, that's been something I've been doing, is you know, not using me. Well, I say not using my phone at night, but I do have to call you out on this. So we do the session, you've sent in a follow-on to it, and the follow-on is kind of the hypnotherapy thing again.
Yeah.
So I do have to turn my phone on at night in the bedroom to listen to that before I go to sleep. But at the same time, I'm gone. You know, it's been, what has it been, 2.5 weeks, I think, 3 weeks since we did that session. And I listen to it in the morning and obviously get to the end of it, but I don't think I've ever heard the end of it at night when I get into bed, because I'm gone. Maybe it's just you're boring me and putting me to sleep quicker.
So just so the listeners understand, as part of the process as well, therapy is after the main session, I then provide Matt with a recording for him to listen to every day for 28 days to install new beliefs, habits, thoughts, you know, just into reprogramming in code what you want in your life now. And you listen to this every evening just before you go to bed. Now, what I always suggest is that you first put it onto airplane mode and do not disturb. So what it means is that there's going to be no EMFs or any charging going through when you listen to that recording. And you normally, because part of it is hypnosis, I switch off the conscious mind so you naturally fall into sleep. But just because I sleep does not mean the subconscious is not listening to it, because that's when the subconscious really comes into itself, because it's only when the conscious mind is switched off. I'll give you an example. If you're talking to someone and you are trying to tell a story and you can't remember the name of the person that you're trying to refer to, and you're saying, what's his name, you can't remember. And then you go to bed, and either in the middle of the night or when you wake up in the morning, you remember the name. And the reason being is because that subconscious now has an opportunity, whilst you're sleeping, the conscious mind is switched off, to start going into the hard drive, because you still want to know the name of that person, and it will pop up.
Yeah, yeah, and it's I think I said it to you at the very beginning, you know, when we had our very first call after you'd kind of reached out. I think living a life like a coiled spring for so long, and being full of anxiety for so long, I was quite skeptical, I think, and would be very skeptical. Certainly when people kind of reach out and say, hey, how's it going? By the way, this is what I do. I'm like, really? Okay. And as you say, you know, it involved the hypnotherapy and stuff. And like, oh God, he's going to have me dancing around with a broom or something, you know. But you do have those misconceptions of what therapy is, and certainly what hypnotherapy is and stuff. And certainly I had those misconceptions going into it at the beginning. But it works. Like, I'm living proof of it. It absolutely works. I think certainly, and again, going back to the sleeping element of it, or the nighttime element, when you're listening to that recording again, I'd lie back and I've got my headphones on and I press play. You start to go into that hypnosis state then again, and five minutes in, I'm gone, passed out completely. My wife even said it to me, I think after the first night. She's like, you were out cold. She goes, I've never seen you be so still and so deep asleep. She goes, I could hear something happening on the headphones, but I daren't touch it. But yeah, no, it is. It's incredible. It is. I have to say, like I said, look, I was very skeptical at the beginning of it. I would absolutely promote that kind of therapy now. I think it's fantastic. It does work. I think there's an argument to be had for both, you know, this, should we call it new age therapy versus conventional therapy. I think there's a market for both of it. Obviously, there's a place and time for both of it, for sure. But definitely, I think I can understand and see now why the likes of life coaches and NLP and CBT and all that is becoming a lot more profound in society, because we want instant gratification, don't we, as people anyway. That's why TikTok videos, you'll fly through them and you get that instant gratification from those videos and stuff. So it would stand to reason that to fix ourselves and our mental state and our mental health and stuff, that we want it instantly. So you can understand why there's a lot more credence being thrown towards the NLP, CBT, you know, tap, all of that kind of stuff. And there's something I keep doing now as well all the time. The tapping of the finger.
Yeah, I mean, look, I have some clients that the challenge that I have is that not many people know about this kind of approach now. You know, this fast, effective kind of the fast and effective results. So people are used to just believing that the conventional route is to see a counsellor or therapist every week. So I do have clients that want to see me every week to talk about something, which is fine. Normally, there is not anything in particular that is causing them a great deal of issue in their life at that moment, but they just want to. I'll give you an example. Someone I spoke to this week had an issue with family structure and issues with their sister trying to be an alpha female. It was a very simple discussion about family dynamics, but we went into cultures and other things associated to it. And we kind of worked through it, and I worked through it by asking questions. And by asking questions, they come to the solution themselves. So I offer that service as well, but many people come to me, a lot of people come to me after seeing a counsellor or therapist for 10 to 12 weeks and say, right, okay, I've unpacked all this stuff with these people, and they say, right, okay, time's up, this course is finished, and you're on your own. And that's when people come to see me. And then they realise that they needed to do this a lot sooner to get these results, because otherwise they're just carrying this baggage every week and taking it to on the couch and then taking it home. It's like, what do I do with this now? You know, because sometimes, like you said, you've gone to have a session and you've gone home and thought, okay, you're trying to psychoanalyze this now to understand what it means to you. And this is why, with the work that you and I did, I stay with you to go through that. You know, and this is where the CBT comes in. It's about understanding those thinking patterns. You know, is it catastrophic thinking where you think everything is worst case scenario? Is it like you're just a fortune teller where you believe that you can see what's going to happen next, even though you have no facts or evidence to base that on? You know, it's all about challenging your thoughts, your thinking patterns, your behaviours to see if they're actually relevant in your life today.
Yeah, yeah. And it is, it's absolutely brilliant now, I have to say. And it does, you know, look, you've said it a good few times over the course of this interview now, it just gives you that different view, that different perspective, that understanding. And I think the key part to it as well, and you mentioned it earlier on, is that it's not necessarily the time or the place or the incident. It's the feeling that you had during it that stays with you the whole time.
And the meaning, because that's the
and
core
the meaning, yeah.
It means
so
to you personally.
Yeah, so at that point, when you're feeling 30 years later, when you're feeling anxious or scared or something, there's a feeling in there, and your brain wires are flying on all cylinders at that point, trying to bring you back to that point and back to that time and that feeling that you had at that very specific point when it all started, and it's making you act in a very certain way, and it's making you behave in an angry way, in a scared way, in a whatever, you know.
But remember, a belief is an emotionally based idea that we hold to be true without any evidence or facts. And what I mean by that is just because you believe it that way doesn't make it the truth. And this is why we talk about Santa Claus, for example. You believed it for so many years, but then you realised it wasn't the truth. Unless it is true, I don't know. You tell me. But when we did the exercise, you and I said to you when we first spoke, was I asked you, tell me something recently that'll upset you, and you told me a story about something which was the event, and I asked you how did it make you feel and what did that mean to you, and then we drilled down to that, and you said it meant that they didn't care about me, for example. I said to you, okay, now let's look at this event again, and let's look at 10 other reasons or possibilities why that person did that at that moment in time. That's got nothing to do with you feeling that they don't care about you. So we went through these possibilities, these reasons. And what we realised was there could be many reasons why that person believed that person did that in that moment. But your meaning to it was that they didn't care about you. And then when we went through the exercise, I was saying, okay, so the fact is this, is that there could be many reasons or possibilities why that person did that. And you chose the one that was the worst, the one that hurts you the most, which meant that they didn't care about you. Well, the fact was, it wasn't as if this person done this and you went through a list of possibilities. You didn't say, it could be this, it could be that. You instantly, automatically went to the point of, he doesn't care about you.
Yeah. And that was the thing. It was, I think that was something to do with work or whatever, if I remember correctly. But at the time it is. But I think that was something I was doing for a long time, you know.
Yeah, but that's the point.
You know,
it's your core
that's
belief.
the saying, like, yeah, you don't see the wood for the trees at times like that. You know what I mean? It's something happens, you instantly, and I'm guilty of doing that for years. You go to the worst case scenario first, and then it's just a blind rage. Then at that point, you know, then the old patterns come back. The moody aggression, not aggression, but you know, the family can tell you're pissed off. Basically, what's after happening, and you're moaning and giving out.
But that's the point, is that the present day is always affected by the past. And what I mean by that, something happens today, and your meaning to that was, he doesn't care about you. And then I said to you, is this the first time you felt like someone didn't care about you, or does it go way back? And I could see your eyes spinning round, because a lot of the work I do, even though we're talking, I'm really watching your behaviour, I'm watching your responses, I'm watching your physicality, because that's showing me a lot more. And even your micro expressions, or even the way your eyes moved, part of the NLP work. So I can see really what's going on. I can see you're really thinking about this, you're going back in time, there's an unconscious moment, and then you say, okay, it goes back to a long time ago where I felt like someone never cared about me. So what it tells you is that when someone does something today, it brings you back to a time and a place where that core belief was first formed, and every moment since, which then brings up all those emotions, those memories, and that's what makes you angry. That's what makes you respond in that way.
Yeah, and it does. It makes absolute sense. You know, it really does. And like that, as I said, you know, a few times, I think the therapy session or the hypnotherapy session was incredible and so valuable. I think for me, even from a daily routine perspective now, in looking at things, looking at situations, in something might happen, is kind of just taking a breath, looking back and going, okay, assess it. You know, look at it in a different way. They're not. You're not getting personally attacked here. This is what's happened. Life happens. The world doesn't revolve around you. Do you know? Almost. Do you know what I mean?
And that's why we used a couple of other techniques where normally there's something called the stressor, something that triggers us off, and then we've got the response. Now, normally in everyday life, something stresses us, we respond instantly. It's like this. And what I do through the techniques, I open up this space. So what it allows is that when something stresses you out, rather than responding, you just take some time to really think about it. What's going on? Why am I being triggered? have a breath, take a moment. What could be the reason this person has just said or done this to me? And it allows you that space and time. And by giving you that space of time, then you can think about the response, to think how smart you can be. What's the best way to respond to this in a calm and relaxed manner? Because it's all about relaxing the body. Because by being in a relaxed state, you can start thinking logically. When you're in an emotional state, you're erratic and you're angry, you can't think logically. And this is where anxiety and brain fog comes in, because when you activate those stress levels, you can't think logically no more, because all of a sudden you're in an emotional state. You're in a survival mode. You're in fight or flight. That radar starts to work and it's looking for problems. Sometimes they're not even there, but we're always looking for problems because we feel under threat. We're on high alert.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think I spoke about that before, like with the flight or fight response. So that's everything else shuts down. Your logical brain shuts down because it just needs to deal with this, or what it's perceiving to be some sort of danger, whatever that is. It might be you've gotten into it may not necessarily be actual danger, but you've found yourself in an uncomfortable position in an argument. Tensions are rising, whatever it is. It could be an argument with your husband, with your wife, with your kids, whatever. Your emotive state is coming back and it's making you this big aggressive ball of anger, basically. Flight or fight is kicked in, logical brain shuts down, you can't see the wood for the trees. So how do we, because I understand it now, and as I said, like over the last 18 months, 2 years or so, and even with the amount of conversations I'm having with different guys doing the podcast, talking with lads like yourself, it's not a quick thing to turn around really either, because for me, going into all of this, I had 38 years of learned behaviour. And I think that's the biggest one. It's, you might find yourself slipping back, but I think now I've got the knowledge and the education, I think, to kind of look at those slips and make them less frequent, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But how do we start to, or like ourselves, like if you've any tips for any of the guys out there listening, the lads, dads, whatever, listening, how do we try and break down that learned behaviour? How do we?
I would say it's more conditioned rather than learned behaviour. We've conditioned ourselves to be like this because sometime in our past, for example, with anxiety, it's a fear response because we feel unsafe, we feel like we're in danger, we feel powerless, we feel helpless, we feel isolated. And in that moment, you feel your core beliefs are the world, or your worldview is the world is a dangerous place. I can't trust people. I need to take care of myself. We're unsafe. Anything can happen at any moment, which means everything's uncertain. And what happens is you're conditioning yourself to see the world in that way. When in fact now, because that's the core belief when, say, for example, you're 7 years old. But now I'm talking to a 40-year-old man, and I'm saying, honestly, right now in this moment, without using the word could, tell me how you're in danger. Tell me why you feel unsafe. And by using that technique of just saying, use the word could, and they go through the process of looking at this incident to see what's going on. They realise that in that moment they're safe and secure. They trust in their senses. They're using their vision, their hearing, their taste, touch, and they realise in that moment they're safe and secure. And this is about the reset. So all of a sudden, the story they've been telling themselves for so many years, the world is a dangerous place, I feel like unsafe, I feel like I'm under threat, something bad is going to happen to me right now. Everyone has a story they tell themselves, and most of the time that story is not completely true. But once you change that story, you can change your life. You can change the way you think and feel about yourselves. And that's how quickly you can reset everything, because it's all about perspective. All of a sudden, for many years, say for 40 years, you've been thinking, the world is a dangerous place, I feel unsafe. But that's because there was a core belief from when you were 6 or 7 years old, and you've just never changed that story. And once you change that perspective, all of a sudden, there's a release, there's clarity, as you say. You feel lighter and calmer. You know that you can take care of yourself. You no longer need to worry about anyone or anything. You can take care of yourself now.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is, like I said before, it's opened my eyes, absolutely, to a new way of thinking, a new way of looking at it. I think the method of it, everything, just it ticks all the boxes. And for any of the lads listening, if look, I keep drumming or banging the drum about it, start talking. It all starts with a conversation, in my opinion. For me, it was I sitting down one day, I got a message on Facebook from Sean. I was like, oh, who's this lad? And it started with it was just a simple conversation it started with, and for me, it's done wonders as far as I'm concerned. As I said, just from taking a different view of it, a different perspective of it, and looking at it from a different perspective, a different angle. So it's been fantastic. So from me to you, Sean, I want to say thank you. It's been brilliant.
You're welcome. And one more thing I'd like to say really about men's mental health is that sometimes when you check on your friends at work or in your local area, it's really important just to check in with them by saying, are you okay? Because sometimes it's not about the things that they do or say. Sometimes it's about the things that they don't do or don't say. You can normally start seeing the difference in behaviour with someone. So when you ask that question, are you okay? As a man, yeah, I'm fine. But then pause and then ask them again. Say, no, are you okay? And just look at their eyes, and you'll normally see their eyes shift down, which means they're starting to think about, am I okay? What's going on?
Yeah.
That's the moment the conversation really starts.
Yeah. And I think we have to, I think as a society, definitely, but I think as men, we have to become better at doing that. To the lads around us, whether it's our sons, our brothers, our friends, work colleagues, whatever, so many times, and I'm sure you with the work you do with the Samaritans and stuff as well, I'm sure you hear it all the time, is that I don't have anyone to talk to, nobody would listen to me, I don't know where to go, I don't know what to do. Yeah. But there's always somebody who will talk to you, there's always somebody who will listen. Whether it's ringing the Samaritans, whether it's ringing, if I think on the one point, I think you're right. We ring our friends and say, look, can we go for a beer, go for a walk, whatever. I don't think we truly understand how to have that conversation, and I think that's what pushes us back from ever having it with our friends. Yeah. Certainly, if one of your mates says to you, look, I'm having a shit time at home, mate, I don't know what you want me to say, because we don't know. What I can say to the lads who think like that is, you don't have to say anything. Shut up and listen. The guy wants to talk, so literally just let him talk. If you don't have any advice, you don't know what advice to give, don't give any, because that's probably better than giving the wrong advice sometimes.
Yeah, it's about listening, and that's Samaritan listening, because when people call up, with many men that call and say, I can't take it no more, I want to end my life. So my first question to provoke them is to say, okay, is this about you wanting to end your life, or is this about wanting to end the current situation you're in that's causing you this pain and suffering? Because for many people, the core belief at that time is dying is less painful than living. So we really need to dive into what that means. And this is why we change the way they think and feel about themselves.
Yeah. And I think, look, I mean, you know the statistics on this as well, and one of the main reasons why I started doing the podcast and creating The Anxious Lad and doing all that is 75%, or just over 75% of global suicides are men. Yeah. And if we look back to what you said very early on in the conversation, women will talk about their problems, men don't. Men make up 3 times the amount of global suicides. There's a correlation there, lads. That there's a reason why we're killing ourselves at an alarming rate every single year, and it's because we're not talking. It's because we don't know how to. It's because we feel we can't. It's because we feel nobody will listen. People will listen. There are people out there that will listen. I think we need to be that little bit braver now about taking that first step to opening up and having that conversation, and hopefully we can start to bring that suicide rate down. But it all, like I said earlier, lads, it all starts with a conversation. We have to get better at talking. It's as simple as that. And like that, look, there's lads out there that can help. People like Sean, counsellors, therapists. There's a lot of help out there, guys. I think we just need to find out what works for us and how we go about doing it. But it's about taking that first step, I think, as well, Sean, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, well, listen, it's been a pleasure having you on today. Thank you so much for agreeing to do it and taking time out of your busy schedule to jump on and do the show with me. I really, really appreciate it. It's obviously not going to be the last conversation we have. I think you're stuck with me now.
It's nice. It makes a change for you to ask me questions rather than the other way around.
Yeah, for sure. Final thoughts. Anything you'd like to say to any of the lads listening, just from a generic point of view, general mental health point of view, from your work as a Samaritan? Is there any insights you'd like to give the guys before you jump off?
Yeah, I'd just really like to say that you're not alone. There are many people going through the same thing as you. People think that they what they're experiencing is unique to them, and they feel like it's something that they're trying to manage by themselves, or they feel like they don't want to share it. It's really important to reach out and to go into community groups, to social media, reach out to people and tell people how you're feeling, and slowly we can work through this.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. John, listen, thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And guys, if you're listening and you want to check it out, newmetherapy.com, I believe is the website, Sean?
Yeah.
Yeah, so check it out, reach out if you need to have a chat. Sean really does know what he's talking about, lads. He really does, and he can take that from me. Listen, it's been an absolute pleasure, buddy. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Cheers.
Take care.